February 2021 event, and tonight we are pleased to present Olivia Warro, a feminine fabricator. As a graduate of the University of North Florida with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, Olivia received Outstanding Sculpture Honors from the UNF faculty upon graduation. Currently, she teaches the middle school art students, and she teaches them and inspires them while she is applying for graduate school. Olivia creates out-of-this-world sculptures which delight viewers, and while at the same time, perhaps, have them wondering about the nature of reality. Olivia intends to break the mold in what materials and subject matters are expected in the art of sculpture. And I think she's off to a brilliant start. So please join me in welcoming Olivia Warro.
All right, so let me introduce myself really quickly. I'm Olivia Warro. I graduated from the University of North Florida in 2019, and I've since then included myself in any and every art community I possibly can here in Jacksonville. On Saturdays, I still go back and work at UNF. I do some of my fabrication at UNF. And then on Sundays, I occasionally work as a figure drawing model. So I try to stay involved in as many avenues in the arts as I possibly can, as well as being a full-time art teacher at Fort Caroline Middle School. So, jumping on into the presentation. All right, so how did I get here? I have always been interested in art ever since I was a little girl. My parents were very supportive and gave me all the pencils and paper I could possibly want. You know, any kind of art supplies, my parents were there for me. Thank you for that, parents. I had the opportunity to make art early in life. I was introduced to clay, I believe, in elementary school. I got to work with clay for the first time, and I fell in love. I was like, oh my gosh, I've worked with pencil and paper before, but clay is this whole other world of materials that I got to delve into. So I went on to high school, and I really focused in on working in clay. I fell in love with the 3D and being able to create these amazing structures. Alright, so I also learned how to work with thread and yarn. My parents taught me how to knit early on, so I remember taking my knitting to show and tell, and all the other kids were like, what is this girl doing, bringing knitting to show and tell? Oh my gosh. So anyway, that was me as a little kid, always interested in the arts. Alright, and I was always intrigued by the world around us as well. I've always loved animals. I've always been fascinated with anatomy and how these animals work, and how their bones and how their muscles work and how they move. And you can see that in some of my artwork. I like to make them look lifelike and make the animals look like they're in motion. Moving on down. All right, so jumping back to high school, I became addicted to clay in high school, and I thank my high school art teacher for letting me play with that much clay. My high school art teacher was so nice. She let me go off into the back of the room and just work on my own projects, and try to, build my little portfolio in high school there. So I do thank her, and we've stayed in touch since high school. I recently installed a public sculpture there last weekend at Atlantic Coast High School. So I do thank my high school art teacher for giving these opportunities to me. Back in high school, I was gifted some cat skulls. While I was in a drawing class, my teacher saw that I took an interest in these bones, and he was like, here, why don't you take these home and practice drawing with them? So I think that's where my interest in anatomy and bones started. So I wanted to figure out how things work. And, going right to the core of it, your bones are in the middle and help you move around and make things work. All right, so moving on. Let's see. After high school, I enrolled at the University of North Florida, and I expected, oh, you're going to be working with more clay, I'll get to improve my skills with clay. So to my surprise, when I started there in their sculpture program, they wanted me to learn how to weld. I was like, oh goodness, I've never touched this in my life. I don't know what I'm doing. I was a little bit scared at first to get into welding. After that first little push, I jumped into it and I took off with it. And I actually incorporated some welding in these sculptures, which I'll talk about later on. So I learned how to weld and work with wood and all these other materials in college. And I started to think about how different materials work together. So, you know, something that is just a stuffed animal is different than, I think, what I have here today. I think that all the different materials that go into it make it a sculpture and not a stuffed animal. So I started thinking about how materials work together in college and made some of these projects. Let's see, I learned how to work with metal, with wood, and hopefully one day with glass. I would love to explore other mediums. All right. So as a part of my senior show at UNF, I decided to focus on fibers and fiber arts. So that's where these guys came into play. I've always been kind of inspired by nature, and I had this image in my head of like a Chinese dragon almost with a skull as a face, and I wanted them to look almost oriental, almost fantastical creatures that wouldn't exist in reality. So kind of snowballed from there, and they turned out to be rather lovely upholstery. I included the upholstery to make them look more like furniture, kind of like the domestic household is coming to life around you and coming out at you, yes. Let's see. I chose to use more luxurious fabrics on these sculptures over recycled materials because I wanted them to appear more like furniture. They include these furs and these tassels and things that remind you of these antiques. And I have actually made some of my sculptures out of recycled materials, but they don't have that same character to them as these guys do. So I have made a bird out of a recycled hoodie, like a jacket with the fur inside of it, and I've made a little cat sculpture out of a recycled t-shirt, that kind of thing. So you can source these materials from things that you already have at home if you're interested in doing something like this. All right. So I do use some different techniques to pull these sculptures off. They have a steel armature inside of them. So this coyote here would not be able to stand up like he is without having some kind of steel armature inside of him to hold him down. And I don't know if you guys can see in the back, but this is what's inside of the coyote. So the steel armature. So I weld these together first and kind of piece together the fabric around this armature. So I don't go off of any pattern or go to the store and buy a pattern or anything. So once you have a couple of pieces of fabric lined up, you can use the sewing machine for part of it. But there's no way you can get around this whole armature with a sewing machine. So I have to go in and hand sew around this armature. So it takes quite a while to put these guys together. Right here on my coyote, I've hidden my hand sewing with this lovely cord here, so you can't even see the hand sewing part of it. It all looks really clean and sewing machine, like the sewing machine did the work. All right, so let's see. Looking a little bit into the armature, here's a picture of one of my other sculptures that I did. So this is what's inside of all of my sculptures. This little cat here has a steel armature inside of it as well. And if you are interested in doing something like this at home, you don't need to learn how to weld. If you want your fabric sculptures to have form, or any kind of fabric to have form, you can go to the store and buy some of this wire. And this wire bends really easily. You can bend it with your hands and just cut it with the pliers or a cutter here. So you can use your own wire from Home Depot if you can't weld and you're interested in doing something like this. All right. Ooh, all these cords. All right. So moving on. Let's see. I actually have a little video of me putting together one of my cat sculptures here. So this was incomplete at the time. You can see the stuffing kind of hanging out of it. And I have to piece this together around the armature and hand sew some of it to get it to stay together. So this is different stages of the process here. All right. And sometimes it's hard to get the needle into those little crevices too. You have to sit there and really like, "Arr."
How do you attach the stuffing to the steel?
So once I have, say I've created his leg here. Once I have one bit of the sculpture created, I make sure to go and fit it around the armature and stuff it to see that it looks correct and you know, matches the anatomy of the actual animal. So for this, I use different techniques for stuffing. So I just use regular old polyfill stuffing here, and you can go in with a pencil or some kind of utensil and kind of really poke the stuffing in there. That way, if any of your stitches have puckered up, you can't see any of those puckered up stitches because the stuffing makes it nice and round and expands the material. All right. Let's see, how do I get out here? Ah! Just use the mouse. There we go. All right, so this is an example of my welding right here. I actually make public sculpture as well, so this was one of my public sculptures that I was working on, but it works for this demonstration as well. My armatures are all made of steel rod. I believe this is 1/4-inch steel rod that you can buy at any metal outlet here in Jacksonville if you're interested in that. So this is the facility at UNF that they have. They have all the welders there. Yeah. All right. And I would love to do a welding demonstration as well, but I don't think I can bring that inside. Oops. Come on. There we go. So these are a few of my completed sculptures that you can see here today. The blue cat is actually off somewhere in a new home, so I recreated this blue cat by creating a pattern. All right, so after I made this lovely coyote, I thought, man, it would really suck if somebody bought this and I would have to let him go. So I wanted to recreate my coyote. To do that, I wrapped him in tape. So if you take a roll of tape, like so, and instead of putting the sticky side down, you put the sticky side out toward you and kind of wrap the entire figure in tape to create this pattern here. Once you have this little cocoon, it looks like, you can section it off into individual pieces. So for example, this was my cat's tail. So I can just cut out these pieces that I've created here and make a whole new cat. So that would be the pattern making technique that I use. All right. So for example, with this coyote, I would just cut off his leg here and kind of draw a part line down the middle where the seam would be, and then cut his leg in half. And that would be the pattern and how to make a pattern. All right. So let's see. All right, here is my contact information. Did anybody have any questions before I do a little sewing demo? No questions? Yes?
I have, where do you get the faces? Do you sculpture those out of clay?
Good question. So I actually found these skulls. They are real skulls that I found, but these are castings from resin. To make these castings, that way I can make as many of these skulls as I want. If I want to recreate the cat again with my pattern, I can cast a new skull for it as well. I won't have to use those original bones that I found. So to make those, I use silicone. So this is my hand here in silicone. You can buy silicone, you can buy it from Michael's here in town, but I would prefer to go to Reynolds Advanced Materials. They have a lot of different silicones and resins you can use. So as you can see, this is a perfect fit to my hand. And after you cover your hand in all this goop, then it dries in about 20 minutes or so. You just have to sit really still for 20 minutes. And after that, we make a plaster shell for it. That way your silicone won't lose its shape. It won't deform when you're pouring into the mold here. So this plaster keeps the silicone together, and you pour your resin into the hand here, and this is what comes out.
Wow.
So this is a copy of my hand here in resin. All right.
So you design the faces
Yeah.
and then go from there.
So they're actual bones that I've cast. So yes, I designed them in a way, but they are natural objects that I've taken from nature, yeah.
Excuse me, what was the name of the company that you went for the resin and everything?
Reynolds Advanced Materials. They're actually down in Orlando, so you can drive up there and go to the physical location, or you can order online. They have about 2-day shipping, so even, you know, without Amazon Prime or whatever, you'll get it in 2 days.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, and I can write that down afterward if you would like. So I use Reynolds Advanced Materials. They're, I think, a subsection of Smooth On products. So if you ever heard of Smooth On, they make really great tutorial videos on YouTube if you're interested in casting resins or even doing the resin pours with paints and things like you've seen. I'm sure you've seen them in galleries and stores before. So if you're interested in doing anything like that, Reynolds Advanced Materials or Smooth On products are great. All right. So moving on, does anybody else have any questions?
Olivia, I'm just curious about this object in front of your machine.
Yeah, so this guy is a snake, and this is what I'm going to be doing my demo on today. So I'm going to be sewing a fabric form around this, and then stuffing a little bit of it maybe. We'll see how far I get. So, yeah, so this is a snake form here.
Do you do all of your welding at UNF, or do you have your own?
I do have my own welder. I recently got a gas tank for it as well, so I can weld at home. I would prefer to work at UNF so that I don't burn my house down. Yeah. I don't have the biggest studio space at home though, that's why. I could work out of my garage, but like I said, it's a little more dangerous than working in a place
But
that's
they
made
allow
for it.
you to go.
Yeah. So I work as a lab tech on Saturdays at UNF, so I keep the labs open, help students out there.
That's great.
Yeah. So, anybody else? All right, so I have some fabric samples here today, and I just get these from Joann's or anywhere you can find fabrics. I usually go to the remnants bin and dig through and find whatever scraps are cheap and easy to obtain. But you can get these from anywhere that sells fabrics. All right. Come on. There we go.
Do you ever do commission work where they have a certain color scheme that they're trying to work with?
So I have made a couple of commissions, but nothing that they've requested a certain color scheme yet. So we'll see. But I do all different colors. I have a whole sewing room in my house that I have all sorts of different color fabrics, so I could come up with any kind of color you want. But right now I'm doing blue and green and white, it looks like here. So that's what I've brought with me tonight.
Do you have your sculptures for sale in any of the shops around here?
No, I occasionally show my work at Word Revolt Gallery in Atlantic Beach. I work with the gallery pretty often, and I actually am going to be in their next Fibers exhibition coming up next month. So other than showing them in the gallery, I don't really try to go out of my way to sell them, but it would be nice to.
Yeah.
All right.
Where is that in Atlantic Beach?
So off of Mayport Road, it's right by, oh gosh, what is that first turnoff at Mayport Road at the light? You can either go down to the right. I'd have to look it up.
Atlanta.
Yeah. Solano and Mayport Road. Right there, there's a BP gas station on the corner. It's right in that shopping plaza next to the BP. Yes. So right around that area. But they're a nice little gallery. Very homey, welcoming people. All right. So some of the other things that I do, I have so many hobbies. Some of the other things that I do is collect and restore antique sewing machines. So if you've ever seen one of those Tradle Singer sewing machines that are foot pedal powered, I collect those, and I have about 3 of them at my house right now that I'm restoring.
Do you survive on 2 hours of sleep?
I feel like I do sometimes, yes. So, All right, and we need number 3. So I'm gonna combine all 3 of these fabrics to see how it looks. And I end up remaking a lot of these. Actually, I'll sew something together and say, oh, I just don't like how those 2 fabrics look together, so I'll take it apart, redo it, see if it looks better.
That's like me, you can do everything in at least 3 things.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Did you ever start out sewing clothes?
I have sewn a couple of outfits. I go to like Renaissance fairs and I've sewn like a Renaissance dress kind of thing before for a costume, but I don't sew any of my own clothes. I wish I had time to. It would be lovely to try. But yeah, I just haven't made it around to that yet. All right. So, how many of you guys have used a sewing machine before? Yeah, almost everybody. Oh, props to you guys. That's awesome. Yeah, perfect. It's a good handy skill to have if you haven't learned. So, I have my oldest sewing machine here. I've had this since I was probably 13 years old. Right now I have about 10 of them. So this is just the most reliable one. I know it won't kick out on me in the middle of this demo. So, your on and off switch. There's a foot pedal on the ground. There's different tensions and speeds that you can figure out, but mine is pretty simple, straightforward. There's only a couple different buttons you can push. Once you have everything threaded up, you're going to line up your fabric under the foot here. And if you put your foot down, and we can begin sewing. All right. So I'm doing a quick demo here today. Normally I would pin everything together and use little pins to make a straight line and make sure everything's properly lined up, but right now I'm just going to go through pretty quickly. And if I can find my scissors. All right.
Do you have like heavier duty for upholstery fabrics, like a Viking or?
So I have an embroidery machine, I have another brother sewing machine that I use frequently, and then all the Singers, the heavy duty metal Singer sewing machines, those will do wonders. They'll punch through anything. So. But yeah, this is just a normal sewing needle, nothing crazy in here.
Put it on the snake setting.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. All right. So, let's see. All right, if this is going to be the top here.
What kind of projects did you do with your welding when you were at UNF?
So I have a few public sculptures here in Jacksonville. I built a 8-foot tall deer that's still in Hemming Park right now. I have a 7-foot stingray that I just recently built and installed last weekend at Atlantic Coast High School, and I built a 10-foot tall jumbo shrimp that was at Jacksonville Beach, but it found a new home somewhere. So,
Somebody just steal it from there?
huh?
Somebody just steal it from there?
Oh, no. UNF technically owned it, so they auctioned it off for the benefit of the sculpture program. So somebody bought it. It's somewhere in Jacksonville.
Oh.
So. All right. So I would need to go back and refine this shape a little bit, but I don't have a stitch remover right now, so I'm just going to work with it. All right. So once you have your fabrics sewn together, you're going to flip them inside out and see how it looks. And this certainly won't cover the whole length of the snake, but I just wanted to do a quick demo for you guys. So these steel armatures are actually for a different exhibition that I'm going to be in, relating to the rivers around Jacksonville. So instead of covering these steel armatures with fabric, I'm going to source some recycled objects from the St. Johns River and kind of weave the recycled materials through the steel armature here and create an environmental piece. So this is going to be a whole new group of work. The bird on the end there and the snake here are going to be together with the recycled materials. So that's just another thing I'm doing.
Wow.
So do you have to have your large pieces delivered?
So I had arranged to have them loaded up on a trailer and transported to the location. I was able to lift the Stingray with one other person, so they're not too heavy to lift. So I try to keep it, my scale, so I can at least deal with it and I won't have to have some crew come in and, lift it up in a crane or anything. All right, come on, fabric. There we go. I'll just shove this here, see how it goes.
There you go.
All right. All right, well, you can see the idea with this amount. And then we're going to take our stuffing here. And just evenly stuff around the armature so that the metal isn't poking through your fabric. You can't see any hard lines through the fabric. There we go.
How long does it usually take you for like a larger piece?
So my coyote, I believe, took around a month to make that. And the cat a little less so, probably half the time, probably a couple weeks to make that. Yeah. All right, so normally I would have a pencil or something to poke the stuffing in with, but we'll just get it down to the end of the tail. There we go.
Out of everything you're doing, is this your favorite?
I think the sewing is more accessible than the welding things for me, just because I can't always weld at my house. I have the materials and resources to do so, but I don't think that it's always safe to. So I would prefer to sew at home and weld elsewhere. So I do like to do all the sewing at home, yeah. All right. So I don't know if you guys can see the armature here is starting to take shape around the snake. I would need to push the stuffing a little farther in with a pencil or some kind of long utensil here.
Yeah.
But yes, I just use polyfill to stuff them up here. And
Now, Olivia,
yeah.
wouldn't that original piece of fabric you did have to be long enough to wind around that whole?
Yes, so I would definitely cut larger sections of fabric. If I were to go back and want to cover the entire snake, I would probably cut around the longest side of the fabric here. And sometimes I will want the design on the fabric central on the animal somewhere, so I'll make sure to cut around a certain design to include that. For example, right here on this guy, I really wanted some of these birds to be visible, so I made sure to cut my fabric so that the birds were central here on his side here. Alright, and the same goes with the cat here. I think I made sure to include the bird here on his side so that you can get the full portrait of the bird and not just some snippet of his wing.
How do you attach the resin skull?
So there is a steel armature sticking out at the head there. I didn't sew that fur area shut. So where the armature is sticking out, I kind of used epoxy to glue the resin skull onto that armature. So he's pretty well on there. Yeah.
Where do you find your fur?
So they're fake furs, just by Joann's, that kind of place. I don't use real furs, not unless I find them somewhere. I don't want to mess with anything, you know. No, I love animals. I would never do anything like that.
Go to Goodwill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, perfect.
That old mink coat?
I haven't even cooked
Really?
Goodwill. Yeah.
So, Olivia, do you
Yeah.
have a plan for that snake, or is it kind of evolving as your fabric and dictates?
Yeah,
and-
so it kind of evolves as I go. So for example, the coyote, I had a plan for this guy, but certain details, like the cord on the side here, this came into play when I realized, oh, I can't use my sewing machine for the entire thing, so I want to hide those hand stitches. How do I hide the hand stitches? Let's put some nice cord on here to hide those stitches. So kind of things fall into place as I go. But now that I have the hang of it, I think it flows more naturally, yeah.
Do you sew the cord on or do you glue it?
Oh, it's sewn on there too, yeah, so it's not going anywhere. Yeah.
Olivia, when you started the snake, you put 3 different fabrics together.
Yes, and I miscalculated how they would fit around the armature, so I decided to cut off that 3rd fabric.
I just
and-
wondered where the 3rd pattern went.
Yeah, I tucked it inside
Okay.
so that it wouldn't be visible.
I just wondered.
Yeah. So, and if you're wondering about the process, I usually end up sketching my animals first and trying to get the fluid motion of the animal. And I don't want them just sitting there looking into space. I want them active and like hunting or like, you know, lurching backward or something. So you can see my fox here is jumping up in the air, and that'll be another one that I'm working on. I have a bobcat here. This one is actually in the works right now. So I have the bobcat kind of stretching up into the air and jumping. So I start by sketching things out, kind of brainstorming, and then I put it into action through metal. I feel that, you know, some of these armatures are almost like figure drawing or drawing in general. You can see how the lines flow as the, you know, the movements of your body would or the movements of the animal would. And I want the steel to kind of feel more organic than plain old metal, you know, stuff you'd find in a scrapyard. You know, I don't want to look like gears and car parts and that kind of thing. I want it to be organic and flowing and natural. So I make sure to make the armatures line up with my sketches in that way. Yeah.
That piece is really fluid.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
nice.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Did you just use 2 rods of the metal to do that, or is it one
So-
continuous?
This is a bunch of different pieces. So this wing is one swirl here. His legs were one piece here. All his little toes are separate pieces welded on there. The beak is separate from the head, is separate from this body part here. I actually had some trouble making his neck swoop down in there. That's one of the things I had to try it over. Nope, didn't work. Try it again. All right. So eventually I got it down, and this is actually an osprey. So I tried to match as well I could the anatomy of an osprey.
What kind of welder are you using? Are you using a TIG or?
MIG welding.
MIG.
So I do MIG welding, and I just got a gas tank to do it at home as well. So I have tried TIG welding. I would love to learn more about it. I just don't have as much access to those resources.
Olivia,
Yeah.
on the snake head, are you gonna use a skull or something other than fabric?
So yeah, this guy, I will probably end up using something else. If it were to be fabric, I would either end up using the skull, yes, or buttons for eyes. Since he's a little bit smaller, I don't know that I could find a skull that's proportionate to
Yeah.
that. So I would, you know, make him a nice face with some button eyes, and yeah, yeah. So.
Out of curiosity, you said you're getting recycled things from the St. Johns River?
Yeah, so I go
Are
on
you
walks.
going there and picking it out of the river, or is there a place you go for?
So I live in Arlington, and over by Ready Point, there's a little area you can walk along the beach there near the St. Johns River. And I'll go walk there. It's a rocky beach, so there's a bunch of things that get caught in the rocks and wash up. And I'll just walk along, have a rolling bag with me. I'll throw something in the bag, keep walking, you know. Yeah,
So that's what you're gonna use
Yeah.
for the,
yeah. So that's a separate project, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I have a question. When you do your welding at the college, I remember thousands and thousands and billions of years ago, I did some welding, but they had asbestos. You
Ooh.
find it, yes.
Oh boy.
What do they use now to
So they have since moved the UNF Sculpture Lab over to the old maintenance building, and they have cinder block walls in there. I don't think they need to worry as much about things catching on fire. So luckily it's a safe environment to be welding in.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do it at home, cement board.
Exactly, I do green in the
Yeah,
dark, you know?
yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, anybody else have any questions? Really quick, anybody? All right, so you can see here, if you would like to contact me. All right. And about 8 different schools, so we'll see where I end up in the fall, but, you know,
Best of luck.
we'll see. Yeah.
Will you let us know?
Did you apply down in Miami or?
I applied in New York, I applied Texas, Mississippi, Georgia, all over the place, so we'll see where I end up.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah. So I'm excited, the next chapter begins, yeah.
We will definitely follow you.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got something so unique.
Yeah.
Really.
I feel like it's something you don't see very often, the fabric sculptures, and especially with like the fur and the skulls and things, the mixed media element of it, yeah. Yeah.
One of the trips back and forth, I remember, I forget what airline it was,
Uh-huh.
but they had a lot of sculptures, and I was thinking, this size would be fantastic
Mhm.
in a, like Texas or someplace.
Oh,
or
yeah.
You know, in their,
Yeah.
beautiful, you do beautiful work.
Oh, thank you. And like I said, I try to make them as proportionate as I can to the actual animal. So I went online and I looked up how big a coyote was. I looked up all his measurements, how far he is from nose to tail, how tall he is from leg to hip bone. So it should match a real coyote's proportions. And I try to do that with all of my animals, yeah.
Did you have to submit a video of all your work when you applied for your master's?
I did like a slideshow format,
Uh-huh.
kind of like this, yeah.
Wow.
Do you have your Instagram on your cards?
Yeah, it's right up here. It's just my name. Everything's simple. It's just Olivia Warro, oliviawarro.com, Olivia Warro on Instagram, Olivia Warro email, blah, blah, blah. So if you want to find me, I do have business cards up front and some business cards over here.
Great.
So feel free to contact me if you want to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and thank you guys for being here. You know, this is my first presentation to the public about my artwork, and I really appreciate the crowd that showed up. It means a lot to me that all of you came out tonight. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. All right. I hope it was interesting too. I went over a lot of different stuff. So there's some green ones on the end.
So I hope you get to go to University of Mississippi.